companies is the NSO Group, which claims to work with governments around the world to, quote, prevent and investigate terrorism and crime to save thousands of lives.
In fact, more often than not, NSO has been in the headlines because its high-end surveillance tools have been deployed by states against political activists, dissidents, human rights campaigners, journalists, even Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos.
In March, NSO started developing its first, quote, civilian product called Fleming, an analytics tool marketed to government agencies for tracking people's movements.
Fleming's powerful analytical algorithms examine confirmed patients' paths and their historical meeting points with others, generating a list of those potentially infected.
There are many cases of activists and civil society organizations and journalists being targeted and harassed and arrested using the NSO spyware. And so given that record, it's absolutely concerning to have them come around this time in the pandemic offering help with their technologies. Perhaps this is for them an opportunity to whitewash their image, to say, you know, we're there to help. We have a health pandemic, it's a global one, we have solutions.
What I would like to caution us against is taking the marketing brochures prepared by this, surveillance companies and treating them as some kind of ultimate word on the utility of these technologies. I've been observing, for example, facial recognition technology for a very long time. And there, if you looked at that field 10 or 15 years ago, you would see that the marketing brochures and the statements made by the industry were completely out of touch with what those technologies were actually capable of delivering.
Face recognition in the new Lenovo Y series makes your face your password.
But because the marketing hype is there and the public pressure is there, and after a short period of time, the completely ineffective tools essentially become effective because so much money is being channeled towards them.
As privacy rights got trampled in the stampede to create contact tracing apps, two behemoths of the tech world came together in April.
Engineers at Apple and Google have been working together to make public health technology that protects individual privacy, so that people never have to choose between their privacy and the health and safety of their community.
The two companies said they would offer contact tracing software to public health institutions and governments to build their own apps around. At the heart of the system is Bluetooth technology. When two phones recognise that they are close enough for a long enough period of time, they will trade an anonymous string of code with each other, called a key. Should one of the phone owners later input a COVID positive status into their app, the information would get pinged to all the phones that had been in its proximity over the previous 2 weeks. The keys are encrypted and constantly changing, but the most important point is that they never leave your phone, so there isn't a centralised list of who has interacted with who. The partnership has arguably created one of the most privacy-protecting technologies to help track the spread of the coronavirus, a smart move in both business and publicity terms. When I spoke with Evgeny, he brought the solutionist critique to the issue.
Now, I would say that it's not as terrifying to me as many other solutions would look. We have to try to reduce our dependence on solutionists, but we have to do it in full recognition of the fact that the public democratic power that can fill that vacuum currently does not exist in the strong form that it should have in order to kind of be resilient and survive. And if that post-solutionist vacuum, is not filled in by democratic forces, it will be filled in by the security state and the surveillance state, which in its kind of democratic implications is as bad as the solutionist, or perhaps more, at least dangerous for a lot of activists and dissidents.
The pandemic has provided a dual boost for the tech industry. At one level, it's presented governments and regulators with a distraction of global proportions, the kind that's thrown recent investigations into tech practices and disciplinary hearings off schedule and lower down the list of priorities. Second, it's been a huge business boost. Despite the many drawbacks in the way that tech is being designed and works in our lives, COVID-19 has helped cement the tech industry within the private sector, and it increasingly looks like it will remain that way.
It's impossible to think about technology, for example, as something that would not be provided by technology companies, because we think, well, what else could it be? If you're caught in this neoliberal paradigm, you would think that there is nothing outside of Google or Facebook, and the only other alternative would be some kind of centrally planned economy like the Soviet Union. And this is where solutionism steps in to basically say, okay, we have accepted this cost, if you will, of running the world according to the neoliberal template. And here is an app that will help us to mitigate and alleviate the pain and the costs of the neoliberal solutions.
There's a real absence or a real lack, for the most part, of people actually saying no to technology. What we've seen is that there are a lot of folks who feel as though there is an inevitability to this. The concern is that when you have really brilliant academics or very large companies deciding that these things are inevitable, what they do is they give political cover to the institutions who are then going to roll it out. If academics were saying this doesn't accomplish anything instead of this is how decentralization works, the public dialogue about contact tracing would be very different.
So I'm guessing, Sean, you wouldn't put a contact tracing app on your phone?
No, I wouldn't put it on my phone because I don't want to receive hundreds of notifications a day that I've loosely been proximate to someone who has tested positive. For me, privacy is an important protection, but what we haven't seen is a proven value proposition here. And so I wouldn't download it, not because I'm concerned about my privacy, but I wouldn't download it because I don't know what it would do.
During this pandemic, as both the public and lawmakers have grown ever more reliant on the technologies of Silicon Valley, the tech industry knows that this is its moment.
It's not for nothing that big leaders in this industry, like Eric Schmidt, the former chairman of Google, has now been saying that he hopes that this crisis has revealed just how essential and fundamental this industry is.
Imagine the pandemic without Amazon, without Google, without Apple, without Facebook. You'd have, go back to 1918, you'd be operating under great fear.
Ultimately, this industry will use the aftermath of this crisis in order to shape a much more favorable regulatory agenda for themselves.
I think all of us should be grateful that these tech companies are working really hard to help right now.
Unfortunately, I think they will actually find quite a lot of reception among general public. And that is just the consequence of policy decisions. We could have made different decisions 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where we would treat artificial intelligence or logistics or cloud computing as a public good, which would not make us so dependent on the likes of Amazon or Google or Microsoft. And we would be living in a very different world. And I would argue that world would be far more democratic, because right now there is no way for us to have any non-market democratic say in how these infrastructures are governed, because they all belong to private companies.
The large number of unknowns surrounding the coronavirus pandemic can make it feel like a problem too big for us to grapple with. But what we do know, however, is that one of the best determinants of mortality is healthcare system capacity. And we also already know a number of ways to meaningfully invest resources into it. We don't need an app for that.
The most important things that are proving their value now are not things that we invented recently. We see good government communication. We see strong patient investment in the capacity of frontline workers. We see strong social safety nets and care networks built at the community level, at the institutional level, in a wide range of contexts. And of course, technology plays an important part in supporting those roles and in supporting those infrastructures. But the rush to invent something, the sort of push to the miracle cure or solution or whatever else, is often very distracting from, I think, the things that we know to be most important.
I don't want to downplay the role of technology here. Technology enables people to share information and to access information like never before. It enables us to have this interview. So it allows us to continue our lives with as little disruption as possible. But we don't want to live in a world that enables mass surveillance, and therefore it is our responsibility to understand that we're not just idle watchers. The pandemic is not permanent. What it will be permanent is how much are we allowing to go unnoticed and unquestioned.
We have built the world in the past few decades on the assumption that competition should be at the center of social coordination, and we have seen that the consequences of that are far from being positive for all of us. So re-embracing solidarity as a way to reorganize society as something very tangible and pragmatic, that could serve as a guide and not just as an abstract idea, would be a very good move.
Frank assessments.
This crisis is continuing to weaken Lukashenko, even though perhaps he believed in the beginning that it would strengthen him.
Informed opinions.
I think politicians will now be under incredible pressure from their young people. That is one of the most hopeful things to come out of this COP.
Critical debate.
Do you think that aid should be facilitated, not choked to Tigray?